On our Facebook Live to the opening of Unseen Wounds, photographs of the continuing mental toll of genocide, a photo exhibition by Fortify Rights and Saiful Huq Omi, an award-winning photographer from Bangladesh. This exhibition showcases photography that depicts the severe but often hidden mental health impact of genocide, and how these mental health conditions are affecting Rohingya population, the Rohingya population, and genocide survivors daily. We are deeply grateful to the Fort, a space for change in Bangkok, for hosting us today and for hosting the exhibition today until November 10th, which is Sunday. So if you're watching online, if you want to come to watch the show, just, come to the Fort, and then you will be, know more about the exhibition. Today we'll dive into some of the issues surrounding mental harm. What is it and how it is impacting the Rohingya refugees and in Bangladesh and elsewhere, and why it is crucial for us to learn more about mental harm when it comes to the topic of genocide, and why it is considered an act of genocide. We also be learning about collaborative, participatory photography, and how it can help us understand this unseen wounds, the mental health, what's inside the mind and body of genocide survivors and marginalized groups. Joining us today, both on this stage and online, are human rights defenders, storytellers, and advocates for Rohingya rights, each with direct experience and deep knowledge of the issues. First, I'd like to welcome Omi, Saiful Huq Omi, an award-winning Bangladeshi photographer. Please give a warm welcome to Omi. Yay. Yay, yay, yay. We also have with us John, my dear colleague, John Quinley, Director at Fortify Rights. And joining us online, we have Lucky Karim, Founder and Director of Refugee Women for Peace and Justice. Hello, hello, Lucky. We also have Minister Ong Chomo, Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Human Rights of the National Unity Government. We're very grateful that you guys are here with us. So I'd like to start with John. John is the director of Fortify Rights. Basically, the exhibition that you're seeing today at the fort is based on the work of Fortify Rights. The two reports that we released in 2021 and earlier this year. The first report is called Torture in My Mind, and the second is My Tears Could Make Us See. Both reports focus on the Rohingyas' mental health crisis. So maybe, John, could you give us a bit of the background of these reports? How do these photographs that we see here today relate to the work at Fortify Rights, and what are the key findings of these reports? I know there's like two questions, so you can give us a bit of background of the two reports.
Thanks, Zoom. It's an honor to be here with Omi. He's taught Fortify Rights a lot over the years about participatory research and the way he does photography. Back in 2018, we worked with a team of Rohingya researchers, 10... Hello? Is the mic on? Everyone can hear me? 10 Rohingya researchers, 5 women, 5 men, and we taught them research methodologies, data collection, data analysis, and they went out and collected 495 surveys that had about 100 questions on the survey, and they asked Rohingya people in their communities about their experience in Myanmar and the genocide, and they also asked them questions of their experience in the Bangladeshi refugee. What was interesting is the amount that came back on PTSD, on depression, on anxiety. So we worked with those 10 members of the team to write a report, which Zoom mentioned, called Torture. The United Nations basically says after an emergency, either environmental or man-made, about 15 to 20% of a population that has been affected will experience signs of PTSD. What we found in the refugee camps was around 88% of Rohingya refugees experience symptoms of depression. 84% experience symptoms of emotional distress, and about 61% experience symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. That's way higher than what the United Nations shows would be the norm after an environmental impact or conflict in other areas. So we looked at, following on from this participatory action research, we worked with a team at Yale Law School to analyze the results under the Rome Statute and look at the idea of serious bodily and physical harm, but also mental harm. And the mental harm part of the Genocide Convention in courts hasn't really been looked at in a really deep way. Even the jurisprudence that's already in place there's not a lot of it. So we wanted to help the ongoing investigative mechanisms, the ongoing courts looking into the Rohingya genocide, one at the International Court of Justice, you have one at the International Criminal Court, and then you have ongoing universal jurisdiction case by our colleague Toon Kin in Argentina. We wanted to work with Yale to do a kind of more of a legal analysis of if we thought the Rohingya were experiencing the crime under the Genocide Convention, or the crime of mental harm. And the report, I think, overwhelmingly shows, yes, they are. And I think the Genocide Convention was written a long time ago, and science and mental health research has come a long way since then, particularly when it comes to intergenerational trauma, when it comes to effects on children. And so we also looked at the scientific data. And we found that the ongoing situation in Bangladesh and the ongoing situation in Myanmar has signs of mental harm as an act of genocide. So that just lays a foundation a little bit, and I hope to have more of a conversation today with Lucky and Minister Ong Mo and of course Omi and friends and colleagues online and in person.
Yeah, John, before we move over to Omi, I just, one question came up is that, like, you mentioned about, you know, the act of genocide, which were defined by different acts, right? But with mental harm, you know, causing mental harm, it's one of the least understood act of genocide. You know, could you tell us why, you know, why that is, and how not knowing about mental harm impact, you know, the survivor of genocide?
Yeah, thanks, Zoom. I think it's a totally under-researched area. I mean, there's some information on the Holocaust and Cambodia around the impacts of the genocide on generations that came after, right? And so we used actually the studies of Holocaust survivors, the studies of Rwandan survivors, and others, and tried to make an argument that actually this probably will also happen to the Rohingya population. The data is not great now because it hasn't been long enough since the atrocities in 2016, 2017, which is mostly what we were looking into. We also had data on the long-term persecution since the founding of Myanmar, on persecution that was ongoing under former governments, democratic, under former militaries in Myanmar. We documented, I mean, the genocide actually in 2016, 2017 happened under the NLD, right? So it was happening under a kind of quasi-democratic government. But one of the recommendations in the report was about basically to humanitarian service providers to be able to fund mental health interventions to support Rohingya genocide survivors that were experiencing mental harm.
Thank you so much, Sean, for laying the groundwork or giving us some background of the situation. Now, I'd like to move to Omi and the core of today's event, which is powerful photography, you know, that illustrate what's inside the mind and body of the Rohingya genocide survivors. And it also is also notable that these images were produced using a participatory method as well. Omi, can you tell us more about the photography that is on show in this exhibition?
First of all, let's speak about the photographs that are not in the show. I think that will give a better context of why these photographs are made. I have been thinking when John was speaking, and for the last, since I came to the other conference that we took part together, that being a photographer myself, who has been working on this project for all these years, why I never thought about the mental harm part of the genocide. In 2012, when we were the first people to call it a genocide on an international media, why since then, or even before 2008, when I started, the entire idea of mental harm never came to my mind, and I never thought that I should do something on it, whereas I have worked endlessly for 16 years. I think that is what sort of represents the crisis, why people are not giving enough attention to mental harm. I was on the ground, I'm on the ground for all these years. So when this project came to us, or me, from Fortify Rights, as I am very proud to work for, sort of gave me a step back. I sort of felt that this is the first thing I felt. Oh my God, I never photographed someone's mind. So I was running behind genocidal visual evidence of losing life, losing tortured, losing honor, losing this and that. But that was the moment I felt that if you if you read my work, like a visual anthropologist or a historian, and put these two bodies of work next to each other, which is the bigger body of work and this work that I've produced the last few years for Fortify Rights, you'll see that my work has become quote unquote softer. It's no longer harsh, no longer upfront, no longer straight, no longer immediate. So as I have noticed it, and people who read my work as I run an institution, and people read my work as a matter of academic exercise. You see, I have taken a step back. I have tried to become, quote unquote, again, softer, gentle. And so that was a great moment for me, just to get an opportunity to completely do something which I never did before. Also challenge my own comfort zone. In that way, I'm very grateful to Fortify Rights as a photographer. As I've mentioned this before, and I'm trying to, not being humble here, that I have had the opportunity to work exactly the way I want to. Nobody comes to me and say, would you mind photographing this or that? So the body of work you see here, which is a very, very small part of the work that we've produced together and over the years, but it sort of represents the entire journey of a photographer. You'll see there are 2-3 photographs that came out in the gallery in the show, which was taken 12 years ago. And there are photographs that I made like a few months back. And I would, as a photographer, I would never even thought in my wildest imagination that I will end up being in a gallery, a studio. And I ended up in a studio setting up lights, just like a fashion photographer, and started photographing survivors of violence, survivors of torture, whoever was going through serious difficulties. I was using, which is very, very, very unusual for a photographer like us, artificial lights. Because that was the first time I knew that I need a pause. I no longer need to show the world how beautiful the composition is. No longer need to show the world how beautiful the moment is, as like photographers always do. This was a time to take myself off the scene. It was no longer my charisma that I wanted to show. And that sort of, I can go on for hours talking about it, but that sort of work actually changes you as an artist from within. And I'm very grateful that this project came to me, which was not of more than a few days compared to these 15 years, 16 years of work. But if I now go back to my project, which I have become a very different photographer. And I'm working on my 3rd book, and every time I go to my work, I see this is not the man I knew. If you look at my work, I see things from a distance. I no longer wish to expose something because I now know everybody knows everything. It's more about giving people the breathing space. I don't know whether I'm making much sense because I'm talking theoretical about photography. So all these have changed, and the work has that sort of impact.
Thank you so much for the answer. Very poetic. I really love it. You said that it's quite difficult to photograph, mental harm and like mental health because it's inside, right? For these projects that you've been working with Fortify Rights, how did you do it? Can you go through, your processes? And I know that you also work with Rohingya refugees as well. Can you also talk about that as well?
I was asked the same question last time in DW, that how do you photograph something that you don't see? First of all, let me be honest, I don't know how to do it. Like, photography is a thing that you see with your eyes, and you photograph something that you see. So how do you photograph something that is not there, as it's a photograph? So I tried to photograph people without photographing them. So if you look at some of the work that is there, is objects. Objects of people, objects that are related to the incidents that happened to them. And as an artist, as a photographer, what you try to achieve always, you try to put the audience in a place so that he or she can relate. Relate in what way? In simple way. What if it was me? What if it was done to me? What if it was done to my son? What if it was done to my mom? So to take the audience there, where the audience feels that way, is the challenge. That is how photography works. You always try to put the audience in the place where you are standing, as if it was happening right in front of the eyes of the audience. So when we did the object work, it was all about finding things that all of us have. We all wear lungis, as Bangladeshis do. We all wear a maxi, as a woman in Rohingya. There is a difference. I have photographed a woman's dress, which is on the poster I saw today, which was the cloth that she was wearing when she was raped. I have photographed a piece of lungi, which was not here, but you can see in the larger work, which has 2 holes of bullets. He still has that, he still wears that. I have photographed things like a rope, which was used to tie this particular man when the army came to his home and beaten him. When he got out of the house, it is the same piece of rope he used to tie his things to travel to Bangladesh. So these stories, which is not effective if you don't know the caption, which is again something very unphotographic. It's not photographic, like you don't really expect your audience to go to the caption. But here, the process is very different. So I photographed in a way so that people can relate.
Thank you so much, and we'll come back to you in the next round. I'd like to move to Lucky. Hi, Lucky. Can you hear me? So Lucky is the founder and director of Refugee Women for Peace and Justice. Hello, Lucky. So nice to seeing you. Okay, so Lucky, given that John actually mentioned about the reports that highlight the severe mental health conditions faced by Rohingya refugees, I wonder what have been your own experiences, with these kind of conditions. I wonder if you could share some of that. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, we don't really talk about this topic. In my journey, since I arrived in the US for the last almost less than 2 years, we don't often talk about the mental harm or mental issues. We usually end up talking about the bigger topics and other issues part of the genocide for the Rohingya community and other communities in Myanmar. It's really important to discuss some of those personal issues that the community go through and the families and individual in their daily life. I can talk a lot about different things, but then the only thing I need to be very frank and honest about, the genocide is not something that was suddenly started or created by one of those Burmese or Buddhist community or the Burmese military in Myanmar. It's a process, So for me personally, since I was born, what I've seen is as a growing child in Myanmar and as an adult in refugee camp as well, it's always families, my family and people around me is being forced to leave their homes and move from one place to another. Always people being killed, being arrested, going through a lot of those issues in their daily lives. So obviously, for me, if I need to describe myself, how my life looks like as a child in Myanmar, was all about mental issues, obviously. It was all about, it's all about the trauma that I've gone through as a child. So I can already relate to other hundreds and thousands of children around me in my own school, in my own village, and people around me, including my family. Every day is a mental harm issues for them because this is what they've seen, and that's how people grow up in Myanmar and in the refugee camp as well. So coming back to the refugee camps, when millions of us fled home back in 2017, still in the refugee camp is the same situation for them. People are locked inside a tiny shelter for the whole life, and especially for young people age of my group, younger than myself, who have almost nothing to do. They're just free the whole day and night, have no school to go to, have no job to do. So obviously, when they are locked inside a tiny shelter and have nothing to do, and there's of course the growing people and the young people, is a life of, I would describe in one word, it's a second prison for us. Even though we are in the family, we're at home, we're in the refugee camp. Still, it feels like a second prison for us, for every Rohingya almost, both in Rakhine State and in the refugee camp as well. So mental health and the mental harm issue is, of course, the part of the genocide, and is something people almost every second, every day go through, both in the country and outside the country as well. Because the situation when all of us fled home did not change at all. It's just the place that we moved from one to another, and it still remained the same for all of us, even in the camps in Bangladesh. And even it's getting worse and worse. So of course, families who have managed to arrive in Cox's Bazar have still family members remained in the country in Rakhine State. And people who are remained in the country in Rakhine State have still families who were able to manage to cross the border back in 2017 until 2024, who was stuck in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. So obviously, people have connections both with the people remained in the country and the people who are already refugees in Bangladesh, which is why they share the pain, they share the problems, they almost share everything they go through in their daily lives, which doesn't stop them from going through the mental harm and the mental issues. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucky. How has your organization, the Refugee Women for Peace and Justice, have been, working, addressing the issue of mental health conditions? Have you, have programs or initiatives on the mental health?
This RWPJ especially, we have, well, in Bangladesh, people, more than half of them actually children and women and girls, of course. Even though generally we as community have a lot other problems as the genocide survivors and as refugees, but 99% of the time, women and girls are victims of all other problems, including domestic, mental issues and other issues in the refugee camp. And of course, they have less resources and less opportunities to talk about their problems. And they don't have anyone actually to go to and to talk about their issues. So obviously, it's really important for us as member of the community and people of Burma, and someone who have been working with humanitarian organization for many years, and myself, who have almost practically survived the genocide and the refugee life for many years. I know how it feels for someone when we start wearing the hijab and we're actually kind of like forced to be always at home and then never have someone else to talk about their daily issues. So a lot of the time when women are always supposed to be in the kitchen, and the girls, especially the adults who are no longer able to go to school or be outdoors for any purpose, they are the main victims of all other problems, including mental harm. So the RWPJ have done a lot of workshops and training sections for especially adult and the women who are no longer able to be outdoors for any purpose, talking to themselves and creating a space for them where they can feel safe and then secure to talk about any issues they want to talk about, including their life in Myanmar and their daily life in refugee camp and their experience as genocide survivors back in 2017. So these people are, rather than talking about their problems, these people are needing the resources and the protections, and obviously people who could facilitate them and of course guide them with some of those issues. So which RWPJ have kind of like connected them, these women, to some responsible people and those who can help them with medicine, consultancy, and of course other section that they usually need. Yeah.
To further on those points, I'd like to move to Minister Ong Chomo, Deputy Minister for the Ministry of Human Rights of the National Unity Government. Minister Ong Chomo, could you tell us a bit more about the current situation facing the Rohingya population in Myanmar and outside of the country, and how these situations still lead to the ongoing mental health conditions faced by the Rohingya?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an honor to be part of these discussions together with other speaker. And of course, the topic of mental health, it's kind of underserved from both knowledge production standpoint and and as well as service delivery standpoint, it is something that usually in the context of Myanmar, particularly where people are not very familiar with. And I personally came to know um, in kind of more into details about mental health in 2008 when there was large humanitarian programs are being operated as a response to Nargis cyclone in Delta area of Myanmar, and of course the situations in Rakhine State and beyond has been quite complex in terms of producing mental impact or traumatic related stress to the populations. And it when I was working, for instance, in Nargis response area, I came to realize the difference of the mental health impact on the society in the context of man-made disaster and natural disaster. Definitely, it is different, but it is often sometimes that people don't often or don't express to the level that they would need to. For instance, in the case of getting like physically unwell, you will reach to a doctor. But when you're having mentally ill, you would be feel ashamed to be expressing that to your family or to be seeking for support where it is vitally necessary. So it's very good that we are discussing that continuously in this important and dark time for Myanmar and as well as for the Rohingya. To go back to your questions, the situations in Rakhine State remain quite alarming and concerning, and of course the systematic distractions, both physically and mentally, to the Rohingya people just hasn't happened in a singular day or month or weeks or year. It's happened over the decades, over the year, with an intentions, and often and the community as a whole to were not conscious of the amount of post traumatic disorder that they are carrying alongside with them while they were physically being attacked or physically being imposed restrictions. That's And I think the situations remain quite concerning when it's as a continued um, making continuing impact on mental health of the community as a whole. But more importantly, I think the burden that it just not not something that you produce once and then it's transactional, and in fact, mental health is something that you can unconsciously give legacy to the next generations, even though the next generations is not the primary victims of the crimes that's being committed against. And these emotional burdens are very dangerous. For instance, those who are in Bangladesh, of their primary victims, and has the continued impact of the mental health the distraction that's touched the mental health aspect of them. But on the other hand, like if you look people in Malaysia and people who resettle in a third country, like in the West, for instance, their second generations carry certain level of the emotional burden that has been transferred from their parents. And someone who was born in Malaysia has never been, for instance, in Rakhine State or in Bangladesh and resettle in a third country like in the United States. Still, you can see if you use any indicators of the mental health disorderness, you will see both from attitudes and behavior perspective that there are a large burden of emotions that they are unconsciously carrying, which has been being transferred from their parents. And just to give an example, like when I was working as a field worker in the humanitarian organizations in Rakhine State, for instance, I was far not in Budidon Township, running a mobile clinic, providing the team were providing the medical service and such primary healthcare service, particularly with the focus of the malaria Patients, for instance, were coming to get treatment from the clinic through a mobile lab. I saw a woman in the crowd holding a baby of 2 years old, crying like very loudly, where there are hundreds of people are waiting in the queue to be getting treated. And my attentions went there, why this kid is crying so much. And the lady holding the baby, the mother was kind of trying to breastfeed and trying to do everything within her capacity to make this 2 years old baby stop crying. When I approached to the woman, and I heard the woman was saying to the baby that the police are coming to you. I will give it to you. I will give to you to the police. And then suddenly, despite all the attempt that he has made to stop the crying of the baby, this one word came out of the mouth, make 2 years old baby which doesn't know the language and how to speak, uh, make the baby stop crying, while the temperature of the baby, body temperature of the 42 degrees Celsius, when we took the temperature, for instance, while the baby is attempting to survive alive. And this really touched me, like, when I started to work back in Nagesh Respond and came to know a little bit. Wow, this like this is not something actual. If this baby unconsciously understands the language that her mother is speaking and stop crying while she is fighting against something very strong to survive the life, this definitely will carry throughout her life and even beyond. And this is just very one of the many examples that how from a very early stage of your life, even before you know who you are and what is your identity, have this kind of injected trauma within yourself, and that become boosted over a period of time because of the continued operations, systematic. And these are kind of things that people grew up, millions of people grew up with, and these remain often untreated, undiscussed, and people don't know where to approach to seek for help. And this continues today in different part of Rakhine State, and it has been the case. And those who are in Bangladesh and Malaysia as well survive, and they are still facing different challenges as a consequence of the genocide and crimes against humanity they face with. So I think this is a topic that's required tackling far more comprehensively across the programming that humanitarian organizations and others operate in Rakhine State and elsewhere to support the victims of the genocides. Thank you.
Minister, what have been some of the support or initiatives the NUG have been making to protect the Rohingya, especially the mental health conditions?
I mentioned earlier, the mental health itself, it's a very new topic, despite that the resource that within the country related to the mental health from a technical standpoint, first and foremost, counselors, psychologists, and psychosocial workers, and psychiatric. Academically speaking, there are very very few numbers of the people you can count the number that exist within the country as infrastructure, as well as resource allocated to tackle these issues across the country is also very limited, even in a normal circumstance. Of course, we are in a context of revolutions, and to be able to deliver comprehensive support to the victims of genocides and other crimes, other international crimes being committed against it. It's very complex and challenging. And our Ministry of Health indeed is working using technology where it is necessary, where it is realistic and feasible to deliver counseling and first aid, psychological first aid to the people who systematically face or randomly face psychological uh, disorderness or psychological disaster in their life, and and it has been, I think, much more, generally speaking, tackled than before, even though the context is still, itself is very challenging, and the resource that we have is very challenging. And first, we use the technology, and those within the Ministry of Health, for instance, joined from as a civil disobedience movement personnel, also came with certain capacities, despite it is very limited, in order to multiply those, and we are also in the continued process of multiplying the human resource in order to be providing much more comprehensive service when it's come to the supporting mental health to the people in Rakhine State, particularly. Of course, not everything in Rakhine State that we do is visible, and for multiple reasons. And we are working with the multiple groups in order to, particularly even in Bangladesh, some of the civil society, grassroots civil society organizations, to provide to see where we are able to provide both physical and mental health support to the people in need in Rakhine State and in some area of the Rohingya refugee camp. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to go back to Lucky for a bit. Actually, in this panel, we talk a lot about mental harm and severe mental health conditions, right? But as we know that the Rohingya community has long cultivated resilience and joy and community care. I wonder, Lucky, could you maybe talk a bit more about the resilience? Like what are some of the strategies that Rohingya people have been using in cultivate those like tools and qualities in order to navigate the mental health crisis?
As I've said, of course, this very new topic, even for some of us who have been working for INGO organization for a long time, we don't often talk about this. And the word mental harm or the mental health, in my community especially, very few people understand this in their own language, or even if they have to describe in their own words. So we as community, what we do to avoid and prevent and to get our own support within the family, within the society, is only to be close to our own family members. There's only one thing community often use to avoid all of those issues and to get their own support. While also community equally at the same time needing the assistance and the support from INGO. So I think the question again goes back to the local authorities and the organizations who are working to support the refugees, especially people, the displaced people, when they are no longer in their home or in their own country. Because we as community, again, we are not familiar. I mean, 99% of the community members are not familiar with this topic. There's nothing more the community can do to prevent this, because it's a continuous process of the genocide. And there's never end of the genocide. The genocide is not over for any one of us. No matter where we go, where we're living, still we carry these mental issues with us, because that's what we practice from day one. We keep hearing this from our parents, their generation and their generation, and that's how we actually treat the young generation that are coming after us. So that's how the Rohingya, every single Rohingya practice in their day-to-day life to be a regular victim of mental health issues, even in their family, even when they are away from their country, even when they are not seeing the military in real life. Still, this is what we practice as members of the community, because we don't forget the past. And of course, there's not an end of genocide, no matter where we are. So I think as member of the community, there's nothing more the Rohingya can do if there's not enough assistance or support coming from the INGOs. And if this topic is not enough discussed among the civil society organizations and the INGO partners and their families and the community, of course, it has to be more formal and, of course, in a more resourceable for every single Rohingya, for every single refugees to get access to. Because this is something there's actually two things when it comes to genocide and the solutions. We talk about the long-term solution and the short-term solution. I think the mental health is part of the short-term solution, which is possible to solve and to provide assistance to refugees if there's a well-organized committee or among the INGO working group to help the refugees and the people who are no longer in their home. Because this is part of the short-term solution to help people to overcome some of their violence and the issue they've gone through from day one. Because people still practice this, as the minister Aung San Suu have described, how the mothers still use the word to stop the baby from crying and then from other issues, even when they're still baby and do not speak any other languages. So this is how we practice in our own family as member of the community, because this is what we've seen from our childhood. So I think when it comes to solution, how do we solve this? We need to ask ourselves, as a member of the community, as someone who is working part of an organization, I think the only best thing to do would be providing some of those resources, because this is part of the short-term solution, which is possible. We don't have to wait for decades and decades to hear back from the court or from any other political committee, because this is not something that will take us a decade or a year to solve. I think this is always possible within the INGO area, within the INGO community, to help the refugees and the people who are displaced. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And you want to, yes?
Yeah, can I add on to something Lucky was saying? The Rohingya research team that did the participatory action research, which underpinned the 2018 report that we wrote on mental health situation in Bangladesh, those people, some of them were doing psychosocial support in Rakhine State for a long time. They had worked for humanitarian organizations. One of them was like a pharmacist. The other had worked for a humanitarian organization. There was a few women that had done like group counseling sessions in the community for a long time. So they actually came with a lot of knowledge and capacity, and we were just helping them more about building the survey and actually doing the data collection and the interviews. But that Rohingya research team, as Lucky was talking about, the Rohingya people themselves, they're doctors, they're nurses, they're lawyers, they're highly educated people. I think some people talk about the Rohingya as this underprivileged, undereducated group, but actually I think there's a ton of resources within the community already. So we work with some of these really highly skilled people.
I think you're talking about this report?
The one, yeah, exactly.
A torture in my mind. So you can, I mean, we don't have many copies left, but you can browse through our website. I want to go back to Omi a bit. So, we talk about this kind of collaborative work between, researchers and international NGOs, and your work for this report and the other two reports with Fortify Rights have been more about collaboration and participation. I wonder what were your key takeaways from this kind of like innovative approach that you use in producing your work, and how these kind of like collaborative photography projects lead to change? Did you see any, benefits, that the participants in your project received? Yeah. So 2 short questions, not so short.
Thank you. It's a brilliant question. As I teach, I'm a photographer who teaches, and these are one of the things we teach at class. How to make your image more effective, and what are the tools and what are the ways. Like photographers, usually we go into a place, wherever that is, say for an example, a refugee camp, and we photograph what we see, right? But in these sort of collaborations, we photograph what we know. And the enormous amount of knowledge that are acquired through research of such projects, because photographers usually are not picked at the beginning of the project. They are picked in the later part of the project. So by the time I am on the ground, I have a huge team of people who already know so much about the whole issue, what are the things to photograph and how to really navigate and all this. So I think it's a brilliant collaboration. And this is what I also love to teach my students, that the best part of working with a research team, with an organization, is Your images, which is like 10 images for, say, the report you have been talking about, is something that I teach at class more than a body of work that I took 12 years to produce. Because this collaboration, this benefit that I get from collaboration is fascinating.
Short. I try to be short. So basically, there have been some critiques about, storytellers in, doing photography or reports about refugees, right? How did your innovative, kind of like collaborative approach, which is center the dignity and empowerment of the Rohingya people, actually lead to some of other benefits to the community. Basically that. Yeah.
Can you explain what?
Yeah. So basically, there have been some critiques that like the traditional portrayal of marginalized groups and.
Yeah, I understand. First, I mean, let's talk about the bigger politics behind it. Forget about a photographer or whatever. So we live in a society where vulnerable people, victims, are always called victims, not survivors. So when a photographer is born out of such a system, out of such a society, he has the tendency, historically in him, like everybody else, to look down upon people, to think that they need our help. I am the superior. I am here to save his life. So it's very much embedded in the educational system. It is very much embedded in the process we are taught about life and everything else around us. So the problem is in the process of education, growing up. It's a very colonized way of seeing the world, your savior syndrome and all that. The photographers, without even knowing, carry that, just like filmmakers and others do. It's a problem that needs to be addressed from a bigger perspective. That's the first thing. Second thing is, yes, of course, when you are out there, if you are aware that you are just part of the bigger class of people who think that we are the privileged one to save these people, you should be critical about your own artistic approach. And because you might be making mistakes that you don't want to and you are not even aware of. Not that you are a bad person, but you are just taught in this way. So that will be reflected on your work, which is a very problematic thing. And again, coming back to the project of participatory process, just to undo that everything I know and everything I fear that I might also have, this great, wonderful opportunity sort of made me feel very relaxed that at least once in a lifetime, I won't be making that mistake unknowingly. Yeah? So when I went out and started taking pictures for these people, I didn't take the pictures. I was the one who just knew how this thing called camera works. As you know, we reached out to these 10 people and told them, how do you want to photograph, how do you want your photograph to look? And they were at the first time quite surprised because they have been photographed and they have seen other photographers coming in and photographing the refugees. This is the first time in their lifetime someone reached out to them and said, how do you want to photograph yourself as if you are photographing a selfie? So that was a great moment of empowerment. That was a great moment of relief for me. So when I asked them, they first laughed and thought I'm crazy. And then they were like, are you sure you know what you're doing? I mean, are you even a photographer? Because this mindset, the photographer is better. He is going to know what to photograph and how to do. We are just subjects, quote unquote. So this is a role reversal, complete shift of the paradigm, which was magnificent to find. I was very excited because it was also something I took back to my class because it was something that I taught them and talk about my own experience. So it was fascinating.
Hello. I have one more question before we open the floor for Q&As. John, so with, we often see that not states, but organizations or groups have been using bodily harm as, some kind of like intention to try perpetrators of genocide. So with, mental harm is a bit like something as we use as a title of this event is unseen. How do how can we make use of these knowledge and data to try perpetrators?
Yeah, thanks, Zoom. Yeah, I think some of the rationale of doing the legal analysis around mental harm as an act of genocide was to provide information to the international accountability mechanism. So we're actively sharing information with the ICJ, which is the International Court of Justice, and the Gambia's legal team, which is representing the Rohingya, right, in the genocide case at the ICJ. So we're actively sharing information with that legal team, and we want accountability mechanisms and international courts to look at mental harm more broadly in the jurisprudence, right? So that was one of our thinkings towards it, but also as a human rights organization, we're trying to use all the tools we can in the toolbox. And this is one area that we can try to push the law, push the human rights movement forward, and make an argument on behalf of the people we're trying to support, come alongside. We're an international organization, and we're not necessarily like helping them, but we're coming alongside and just supporting them, accompanying them, being with them. And so this is one area we thought that we might be able to support the Rohingya. And I think they've been talking about the mental toll for decades. So I think, and just like they've been calling what was happening to them a genocide long before 2012, even the violence in Sidway. So I think we just kind of took the lead from our Rohingya friends, from our colleagues, and tried to follow that path.
Thank you so much, Jan. So yeah, time for Q&A. If any of you want to, ask any of our participants question, and online as well, if you're watching on Facebook Live. So yeah, anyone has some questions, please raise your hand. One second. No, because live.
Don't like the sound of my voice. So, I had a question about what you were talking about. Having worked with some photographers, I mean, the thing that most people will say is they want to be invisible and be in the background and kind of be eclipsed and not have no one notice them. So everything is very natural, right? And what you're describing is kind of the exact opposite. The people you're taking photos of are aware you're there. They're directing you. And so what would you say to sort of, more traditional news photographers or something about how that approach, they might sort of balk at that and say, well, then you can't get the sort of natural emotion, natural pose or something of that sort.
Yeah, I mean, this was a particular assignment, let us not forget. It was an assignment which had an already defined role for a photographer, which sort of had to achieve something. And I could have gone for regular portraits and maybe portraits that are quote-unquote powerful and stuff. For sure, one thing is for sure, then we wouldn't have this panel. And we wouldn't be talking about it. We would just think that it's just yet another project. I think that's what I would tell people, that try to be innovative, try to question your own system, try to ask what you are trying to achieve. And quote-unquote, there is nothing called traditional. Every work is separate, every work is the same. Photojournalists, because of the photojournalism reason, they cannot ask people to do certain things because it has a lot to do with news. So it has a question of ethics and all that. But documentarians, people like us, we always invent our own ways. And that is what makes the work probably more interesting.
I just want to say, we also worked with Omi on a project documenting abuses from non-state actors in the camp. So Rohingya, Arkan Rohingya Salvation Army and other Rohingya militant groups. And that came with a lot of security concerns too. And so I think Omi during that project as well, which actually we haven't really published those photos yet, except for one downstairs that you can see, sneak peek. I think Omi during that process also was it was a really collaborative process of like, how can I photograph you safely? How do we do this? How do you want to be seen? Is it just your hands? Is it the back of you? Is it just a piece of fabric that you have? And so I think that was also kind of a fairly collaborative process, kind of scary too, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is quite challenging in the sense, why we photograph? We photograph to show things. In this case, we photograph not to show things, not to help you to identify an individual, which is kind of exactly the opposite photographs are meant to do. So which is very tricky.
If you photograph not to showcase, what were you trying to do? Just a follow-up question. Like you said, for this project you didn't try to showcase,
yeah.
But what was instead? What did you aim to do?
What did I get? I think it's more about just to getting back to my teaching identity. I mean, more about photographs are meant to make meanings, right? We create what? We create meanings. We create arguments, conversations and stuff. So in the back of our mind, when you try to produce a body of work, these are the things we want to achieve. If you see that body of work that will come out eventually, you'll see I tried to create something called paranoia, fear, the way the light was used, the way the faces were covered, the way the body, human body was photographed, the very absence of certain things. So you would sort of want to create that sort of fear that, okay, oh my God, what has happened, without really being upfront. I mean, using photographs to photograph violence is one of the most difficult things for an artist. The easiest thing is to go and show blood. None of us want that. The photojournalist have to do it sometimes because that's the way the world is. But when we have the sort of the opportunity to hold back and try to achieve the same sort of impact without showing violence upfront, it's a big challenge. Let's hope that it will work out.
Thank you, Omi. Thank you, Joe, as well. Anyone want have some questions? Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, if Pei, do we have any questions from online? Okay. Yeah, so I think, it's, I'm happy to have this conversation with all of you, and also thank you everyone for joining us today. So the photos are downstairs, and if you have any questions or thoughts, you can talk to Omi. And if you're also interested in the work of Fortify Rights, we will have another report coming out soon that John mentioned about the violence that created by the non-state actors in refugee camps in Bangladesh. Feel free to reach out to us and talk to us. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Lucky. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Lucky.